Hi everyone, I'm Dan Weiner. Welcome to Tea Time Talks. I am an estate planning attorney here in North County, San Diego, and the reason that I do these Tea Time Talks is to highlight some of the really important work that's being done by some of the key people in our community. And I am very grateful to be joined here today by Patrick Stewart, who is the CEO of the San Diego Public Library Foundation. So Patrick, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, glad to.
So perhaps we can start with just you telling me a little bit about your background and what sort of attracted you and led you to the world of nonprofits.
Sure. Well, I've always only worked in the world of nonprofits. My background is in arts, culture, humanities, primarily. I went to school originally as a musician, classical musician, and theater enthusiast and a theater major. My undergraduate degree is in the philosophy of art and aesthetics, and I worked for many years afterwards in theater, either as a director or producer, or then later on as an administrator, and that's where I really began sort of getting my managerial chops when it came to nonprofit work, and continued to work in that field, running theater companies and arts organizations. I ran for many years the theater programs at the San Diego Center for Jewish Culture, and then I spent 5 years in Washington, D.C. as the inaugural CEO of a large performing arts and cultural center that was used as the hub for cultural, social, and economic revitalization of a very important historic corridor in Washington's Capitol Hill area. And then when I came back to San Diego, spent about 9 years as the executive director of a leading literacy and literary arts organization, scaling that out. And then for the last year, a little more than a year, almost a year and a half, I've been the CEO of the San Diego Public Library Foundation. And again, this is sort of this great marriage of all the things that I find very dear and true to my heart: the humanities, arts, education, the role that literature and letters play in our society, and particularly, seeing that really play out in such a dramatic fashion right now, the way that we have become so much more politically and educationally engaged with one another. And I think the advent of technology, not the advent of technology, the continuing development of technology that makes our world so small now, sort of amplifies the importance of humanities and culture. So that's what my focus is. Primarily, that area of expertise lands in the not-for-profit field. So
yes,
I've never really worked outside of the not-for-profit community.
Excellent. And then so that's, broad background led seamlessly to the San Diego Public Library, I guess. And what would you sort of describe as the key features of the library beyond what people presumably already know?
Well, one of the things I think that the library does that people generally, people that use the library know, but the library is so much more a digital and technological and cultural cornerstone of our community. It's really moved beyond sort of the brick and mortar book depository, right? Now, of course, it is still a book depository and it is still a house of research, but the library itself has just taken on a role in the last decade and a half or so of really presenting and creating opportunities for entrepreneurship and economic development, social development, cultural development, the implementation of technology in its programs. I like to say that this isn't, I think that we all have an affinity towards libraries. Growing up, we all have that story of,
Yeah.
you know, doing story time, or, you know, our parents took us to the library. The library was a, you know, a refuge for one thing or for one reason or another, or, you know, opening books and opening stories and opening lives, you know, that kind of thing. But what the library means today is so different than what that meant, I think, you know, for us when we were younger, right? And
Yeah.
so I think what we do is we try to talk a lot about, you know, a connection, historical connection in our own lives to what libraries meant for us, but really what libraries are meaning for generations ahead is so much more, and it's so much more meaningful, and it's so much more technologically engaged.
Absolutely. And that sort of change, that digital shift that started around a decade ago, how has the additional shifting happened over the last, you know, 6-7 months, with, you know, the rest of the world obviously shifting
Right.
towards digital and being, you know, affected in a myriad of ways by this pandemic? How have you been affected?
Well, you know, it's been interesting in the last year or so that I've been there, and I've had a connection and a relationship with the library and our local library system and our library director for many years prior because of the work that I've done. And in the last couple of years, the library as an institution has been trying to talk and develop a narrative around its technological and digital side, right? Its digital component. And suddenly the evening of March 13th rolls around and we have nothing but our technological and digital side to talk about. So, so for us, within probably 3 or 4 days, the digital side of the library, digital programming, particularly ebooks, were accessed at rates of, you know, 300% more than at any period in recent history. And so, you know, our quick response as a library and as the Library Foundation, of course, was to ensure that all of what our citizens were looking for at the library in this new digital fashion was going to be there for them. So we very quickly supported the purchase and the acquisition of new e-titles, resources, so that librarians could very quickly transfer their programs from the analog space into the digital space, working with librarians and teachers and parents, and being able to transition into what distance learning meant. You know, as a parent of a San Diego Unified School District children myself, you know, that, you know, you woke up that Monday morning and you realized you were their teacher for the foreseeable future. And then for teachers, you know, teachers rely on the library as resources as well, you know. So we really, you know, the library made a pretty quick shift, a pretty dramatic pivot to ensure that its digital component was one, up to speed, and then two, was capable of all of the incoming requests that it had. The foundation shifted very quickly, shifted some funding priorities to ensure that the library was able to do that, and working in concert with one another. We met the needs, we were able to do that, but, you know, one of the things now, you know, I think early on, you know, we, along with a lot of other industries, says, you know, well, in 2 weeks when we're back, in 4 weeks when we're back, you know, this kind of thing. And we really had to, you know, by May, June, we realized that this was the way that we operate. And I think that this has created, as most disruptions in normalcy do, it has created a whole host of opportunities to figure out how to, for the long haul, deliver a new library business model, right?
And I guess my question, I guess my question on that would be, even if we do get back to, you know, the new world which looks similar to the old world, are there aspects of the changes that you've made that are going to continue regardless?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, and in fact, you know, one thing that our library leadership team and our foundation leadership team have been talking about on a near daily basis is the library's ability at this point to scale out its programs, right? The digital space has defined by four walls and a roof.
Yeah.
And we have, 1.4 million citizens of the city of San Diego, and the library being the largest cultural and educational institution serving that the citizens of San Diego now has the opportunity to take a look at how it frees itself from the confines of four walls and a roof. Those four walls and a roof are still very, very important, vitally important as community centers, as hubs of activity, as technology spaces and whatnot. So it's not replacing, it's in addition to. How do you now scale programs out? You may have had a program that would reach 10, 20 kids, and now you have the opportunity to reach countless kids. Because you can take those programs online. Now, it takes a different mindset, a very entrepreneurial mindset. That the library, librarians, the foundation is all up to the task. But as one city official that I met with in mid-June talking about the library budget, said, she remarked, I am excited. I am really excited to see how this, upends our relationship with libraries and the role that libraries play in our lives. And I think it's going to be not just in San Diego, across the country, across the world. I think it's going to be fascinating, and it's going to be very positive.
I agree. And I think the mindset shift that you just identified, where at the beginning of the pandemic, people were wondering how long is it going to last and how should we cope in the interim. Now, I think it's settling in that it's here to stay potentially for a long time. We don't know when it's going to finish. So given that uncertainty, we just need to dive in and, make sure things are as okay as they can be going forward. So it sounds like you've had that shift. And one thing I wanted to ask you about, when we spoke a few weeks ago, and this really struck me. So the whole pivot to digital that we've all been involved in, you have at the library, I have in my work, and virtually everybody else has too. The one thing that I didn't think about was the number of people who are not able to just engage in that new digital reality. And, I sort of reflected after our conversation on the fact that it's not something that had been on my radar, that there are a large number of children and others who just don't have access to the systems, the infrastructure, the laptops, the whatever else you need to be able to engage in this new world. And I know this is a subject close to your heart, so I wanted to kind of get your perspective on that.
Yeah. This is very near to my heart and the work that the library does. So, for 3 decades, probably more, for 3 decades, we've had technology in this digital space in our lives, right? And we've understood that there is a level of digital inequity that exists. Some people call it the digital divide or digital gap, this kind of thing. And for that time, the answer has always been, well, let's build computer labs in schools, and then let's build computer labs in libraries, right? So we send kids to school, and then we have libraries as additional resources. And that's where our investment has been. And come the middle of March, both of those safety nets, for the first time, nobody would ever have perhaps envisioned this, but for the first time, those safety nets were gone, right? And so the dramatic Band-Aid that those two institutions have served has been ripped open.
Yeah.
And so the library and the school district are working together. The library as an institution, the school district as an institution are working together right now to ensure that students and parents and families have access. The foundation has developed some relationships with service providers like Cox and SDG&E and supporters to ensure, like Computers to Kids San Diego, San Diego Futures Foundation, to ensure that those families that want to participate in library programs that don't have access to computers technology at home, we'll be able to get that. We'll provide that for them. But it goes beyond just providing the hardware, right? It's the connection itself. And that's one of the things that we're learning a lot about, is the way that connectivity interrupts learning and whole community growth.
Yes.
And so we are working in concert again with the school district and our elected officials to ensure that we're creating opportunities for these families to connect, either through low-income programs or hotspots, or, you know, those, whatever it is that can fix that, can provide a solution today, but it's not a long-term solution. And one of the things that we're advocating for is to look at this as a long-term solution. We will come out of this, right? History tells us that as a society, we will come out of this, and we'll come out of this strong. Yes. But those inequities that have been brought to light during the pandemic need to be addressed. And when it comes to education and access, the connection to our digital components is key. And it's time that we start thinking of this as something well beyond a luxury, and something that's much more, I would consider, and perhaps I'm using the phrase incorrectly, but I would consider a utility. You know, and so the library is doing its part, the foundation is doing its part, the school district is doing its part to ensure that children, family, and teachers have the ability to effectively and successfully learn remotely. It's not a long-term solution, and we're advocating that the long-term solution not be yesterday's solution. So once we do open the doors, the solution is not still, well, turn the computers on at the library, amplify the Wi-Fi in the parking lot, and say that you've solved the problem. So we're using our position as you know, a leading essential infrastructural component to the community to talk more broadly about what this inequity means, what it means to the families and children that are using our programs, and how we can serve as a leader in effectively providing long-term thoughts and solutions to this problem.
I think that's fantastic, and you know, I'm sure everyone listening to this will appreciate the work that you and your foundation are doing, because there's clearly a huge risk here that in the midst of what we're all going through, there can be large chunks of society, children and others, who are just left behind because they're disconnected. So, you know, I'm glad that you spoke about that critically important piece in your work. And just pivoting slightly, I wanted to ask you if there's anyone out there who themselves is considering a career in the nonprofit sector, or perhaps has children who might be considering that kind of career. Is there any advice that you have for them? Anything that you've learned along the way that you would want to share?
Wow. To work in nonprofits in the nonprofit community requires a couple of things. One, you know, a real dedication to your community, society, this kind of thing. This is, you know, the word nonprofit doesn't mean no profit. It's an IRS code. It's how we distribute our profit that comes in. However, to work in nonprofit in the nonprofit community requires a sense of creativity and ingenuity and entrepreneurship that perhaps other industries don't require in the same way. We're dealing with people in people's lives very often in some parts of the nonprofit sector at their most vulnerable, and the ability to understand that you're meeting a community and a group of people where they're at versus the other way around is very, very important. I think it's also important to understand the relationship that you have in a nonprofit, or as a nonprofit executive, nonprofit employee, that kind of thing, the relationship that you have with the philanthropic community, right? And this is something that's that's a connection, that's a relationship that is vitally important, right? You know, so I take, for example, I look at this as solving problems requires a whole host of different communities, right? You have a technology community, you have an entrepreneurial community, you have a community of nonprofit workers that may, like I said, work with community at their most vulnerable, housing insecurity, food insecurity, education, access, this kind of thing. But it also takes us as individuals with means and with opportunity to understand where we're investing our money, our time, and our resources, right?
Yeah.
And when we take a look at our world writ large, and we think about the kind of world that we want ourselves, our kids, our grandkids, so on and so forth, to grow up in, we have to recognize that we have that opportunity to make that happen, right? And as nonprofit practitioners, we have the opportunity to create that as an opportunity for those who want to make this happen, right? And so it's an interesting dynamic and series of relationships that are managed, right? And the ability to be able to manage those relationships effectively, I think, are what make really good nonprofit practitioners. Understanding the community that you're serving, a deep dedication to service, and also an understanding that you have the opportunity to bring people with means onto your side to assist in making a shift and really making a big difference for the community that you're serving. I call it impact. Impact drives income, and that income is felt by everyone involved, right? So an adherence to that kind of a relationship with all of the different members of your community, that I think makes a very, very good nonprofit organization and a very good, smart nonprofit practitioner.
Okay, so someone who believes deeply in community, who is very focused on leaving a legacy as much as they can, and also someone who brings people together and recognizes when there are other actors that need to be involved in what you're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's not we're not in the business of making widgets. We're not one cog in the chain. We're like, very often in nonprofits, you find you are the entire chain.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah.
Great. And one final question for you, Patrick. Are there particular programs that you would like to highlight? If there's anyone out there who's looking to become involved in something right now, or participate in a particular program, are there any key ones that you want to highlight for people?
Well, one of the things that we're working on right now deals specifically with digital inequity, and I am always happy to talk to anyone with solutions or connections to solutions around that. And again, that has led us to conversations with elected officials, executives at technology companies, that kind of thing. Yeah. And one of the reasons that we're doing this so quickly is one of the most important programs that the library presents to teens, particularly teens in low-income areas of the city, is a collaborative program with UCSD called Library Next. And this gives teens who have not otherwise had an introduction to technology, programming, science, STEAM and STEM programs. It puts those programs in the palm of their hands. It creates opportunity to develop college credits, works towards SAT, ACT prep, college board prep. It runs the gamut of creating a student that's ready to leap into the next part of their future. And very often for a lot of these students, they didn't know that next part of the future existed for them. Yes. So we continually look for people who want to support programs like that, provide opportunities for solutions around the digital inequity, because that entire program now will be moving online. And then, of course, we always look for volunteers who are willing to work with kids. Might be a little different this year because of the space that we're in now. But volunteers that are always looking to work with kids and providing expertise. I'll tell you a very quick story. Last year, we opened the San Ysidro branch library down in San Ysidro. It used to be the oldest branch in the system. It was about 5,000 square feet. We opened up the new one, 25,000 or 15,000 square feet. Sorry, the old branch saw maybe a couple of thousand visits a month. They get 25,000 visits on a normal month now. One of the key parts of that was a technology center. and we put the word out for volunteers, and a gentleman who works as a software engineer has been volunteering 4 days a week down there, and has helped countless kids, develop their technology chops, kids who have started their own companies, kids who have started their own, their coding, the software, all this stuff. It's well beyond me, right?
Yeah.
And they are prepared. A couple of kids that, coming from areas that they weren't expected to go to college. They're now first generation college students with
Wow.
STEAM programs under their belt. So those are the kind of programs we run. Those are the kind of volunteers and the people that we look to work with us and partner with us, so that we ensure that those kinds of programs reach as many kids as we possibly can.
That's great. It must be so satisfying when you see all the work you do coming together and kids succeeding in a way that, others never thought that they would.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's why we're here. So.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Patrick, thank you so much. I hope, others will reach out if they feel that they can contribute to the work that Patrick is doing, or for any other reason to become involved in this important work. Patrick, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really enjoyed our discussion.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Grateful for the opportunity.
Of course. Thank you.